precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. And grace will lead us home. When we then met in thousands, we're going bright shining as the sun. Precious Son, we know less. Hallelujah, hallelujah. First hallelujah. And grace will lead us home. You are the words and the music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praise to your name I will bring. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song that I sing. You are the words and the music. You are the song that I...
All righty. So, Esther. We got into this book introduced it last week. So, just a quick review. The Persian Empire, of course, was a vast empire in the latter 6th and 5th centuries. That they dominated a vast area, of course, primarily in the Middle East. We think about Iran and Iraq, so a vast empire. You can see kind of Egypt and Jerusalem, and of course what was Babylon, and this would be now the Persian rule. Susa is where we've seen in one of the capital cities. So we introduced this last week, and we talked about, of course, a little bit of some of the themes: God's deliverance, the courage, of course, the faith that we see in this story as well. We talked about those 4 major characters, and of course Mordecai and Esther, and then of course Xerxes, Ahasuerus, also known as, but Xerxes identified, and of course Haman, the villain. And every story has to have a villain, and so we talked about that. We got into chapter 1, and we talked about how what was happening is Xerxes, all these rulers, down to this very day, okay, we know, including our country, those that are in high-ranking positions, I don't care what party, that's just men of power, drunk on power. We've seen that. It may look different, but it's still the same thing, played out over the last 6,000 years of human history. So Xerxes' father failed to take Greece. They just wanted it. They wanted it bad. And they were pushed back. Athens, Sparta. And so Xerxes is now going to try to do what his father could not do. And so he is in the middle of, historically speaking, we don't learn this in the book of Esther, but we have to go outside the Bible to know what's going on historically. He wants Greece. But he don't have the support. And we talked about the way you get support politically is you buy support. That happens to this very day. We understand that. Bills and laws are passed, not because of people necessarily always believing in it, but they're bought. They're pressured. And so that's the same thing politically. So what does he do? He throws a feast, 180 days. And he brings in all the royal officials. Remember, it talked about that from throughout his 127 province empire. They're going to come in waves, different individuals, different military leaders, and he is drumming support, we know historically. He doesn't have the moral courage, he doesn't have the moral leadership to get people to, let's go fight Greece again. Yeah, because that works so good for your father, right? Now, he's going to try, and he's going to fail. Of course, we know historically. But that's what he's doing, and so they're in the middle of that 180-day feast. Then he throws one for 7 days, kind of for the workers that have had to deal with this. And it says when they're doing this, he is, he's in, what would we talk about? His spirits are good. And he now wants to show off, apparently, his queen, Vashti. And he's going to ask her to come. And she's giving one of her own, notice, for the women of the royal palace. But now they ask her to come. But down in verse 12, she refuses to come. There's a lot here we read into the text. We have to be careful. Please, let's not moralize these stories. I understand that. I've taught a bunch of these. I've taught church camp, youth group. I've done that with the Bible. And it's easy to do it. Now, I'm not saying she has no principle. I'm not saying we can't find application for what they're doing. But what we know historically, and we're going to talk more about the harem in just a minute. The PG version, okay? We're going to keep it wholesome and family friendly here. These Persian men and rulers, let me say this. The queen, historically, would come. They would participate in some of these banquets. Now, she's given one of her own, but it was common for them to also be there, her to be there. And historically, what scholars say is when the king and his people started getting completely drunk, that's when the queen would exit. And what she would do is she's in charge of, if you will, the harem. She has the concubines and the royal dancers and all that. And that's when we know historically she would say, I'm out. These drunken men are now, it's not good for me to be here and to be around this. we're going to call up some ladies from the harem, particularly some of the dancing women and different things. And that's just how that worked. Now, she refuses to come, so I don't want to take away from some of the rabbis, Jewish historians taught that she's being asked to come maybe in only her royal crown. It's possible. So I know this makes for great moralizing Sunday school lessons where you can say she's standing up for purity and look at her as an example of, trust me, I've heard those, I've even taught some of that. I'm not sure that's the case historically, but she does refuse to come. She takes a stand and she draws a line in the sand and says, no, I'm not doing it. And is it more out of self-preservation? Probably. But regardless, she's not going to do it. And I do think there's always an application. We're going to be in positions, we're going to find ourselves As one writer says, when we refuse to speak and act and do those things that are not right, and I think that there's always that application of taking a stand, of not going any further and saying, no, this is the line I'm drawing, and I'm not going to do it. And I certainly think she is courageous, and she is an example in that aspect. I just don't know all the heavy purity lessons that have been taken from her. I don't know if that's exactly accurate with the text, but I do think she's an example of great courage, of drawing a line. The first woman here, the first act of courage comes from her, not Esther. Esther's courage will come, but boy, it's going to take a little bit to get there. It comes here from this Gentile, and that she will say, no, not going to do that, and she makes that stand. And so anyway, that's any thoughts, comments, questions on that, or anything that you have from that? Yeah.
Do we know anything historically about her that would make us think otherwise?
Not a lot. No. There's just a lot of speculation, and that we could take from the text. Again, we know historically that they would stick around until the men got real drunk. And that's when they would exit and say, now we've got some ladies that are going to entertain you men, you drunken men. And that's just, there's no way around it. We're going to get into a little bit of Persian culture. And just like a lot of culture in the ancient world, that's how they viewed women. They were objects of their pleasure. And that was certainly no different in the Persian culture. But apparently the queen had that she had that right, and to say, no, that's when I exit. I've got some ladies that we're going to be calling in for you men to whatever. And that's just how that worked. And by the way, Esther's going to be in that group initially. That's what she would be. We'll talk about that in just a second. Any other questions on that, or Vashti, or anything you take away from that? Or maybe you think, no, if she is standing up for wholesome purity and all that. I mean, I don't want to. Yeah. She certainly has that decision, and she exercises that and says, no, I'm not going to do it. She's certainly refusing the king's order, and that is serious. Now, we're going to see it. There's a lot of this that you have to understand. God's sense of humor here, it is incredible how God is showing these powerful rulers, these powerful men, and all their 127 provinces, and all their power, and all their this, and their that. He can't even get his wife to obey him. You know? It is, look at it here. It's incredible. Matter of fact, what do they start scampering around and doing? Scrambling around and doing? I mean, once she says no, he is furious, right? He burns with anger, and he's going to talk with his experts in the law and justice and his wise man, and he lists those men. What are we going to do about this? She has not obeyed King Xerxes and the eunuchs. They're kind of starting to what? They're worried. Kind of wimpy, yeah. Yeah, kind of wimpy. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Got them here. And they're concerned about what this is going to, message this is going to send. They're concerned about the political, the social ramifications of what she's done. And obviously down to men with their own wives, because they're going to come up with this silly edict. By the way, what are we learning real quick about Xerxes and his character? Hello? No, he's not. He has no character. He's weak. He's wimpy. He is, and God is almost saying, this is who you look up to? Hello? No, I'm not talking. You thought I was talking about the Persians. I'm talking about 2024. This is who you look up to? Now, I'm going to tread real careful here. I'm going to careful, Robert. But this is who we look up to? These men and women of power and... No. Look at them. They're weak. They're cowardly. They're scared. They're broken. The only reason they get by is because they've got money, power, right? Sometimes they've got law. They've got the police. They've got the local government behind them. You take all that away, and it's almost like God often, right, shows us, this is who they are. Look at this. And we got to see that. Anyway, all right. So they're going to come up with this, and I don't want to spend a lot of time. So I want to get into chapter 2 here, but this edict that her conduct will be known throughout the empire, and women will despise their husbands, and blah blah blah, and there'll be no end of disrespect and discord. So it please the king, let's issue a royal decree. Let it be written in the law of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed. Vashti is never to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Her royal position, she's going to be deposed. They're going to take the crown off of her. It could be, why doesn't he just execute her? What do you do sometimes when you execute someone who's taken a stand? Can you make your problem worse if you're in a position of authority and ruler? That was the dilemma with Napoleon, right? What do you do with this guy if you're France? Does he still have a loyal following at the time when he was, you better believe he did, were his people ready to fight and die for him? Yes. So what'd they do? Well, we can't kill him, we'll make him so they exiled him, you remember, historically. And that's where he lived out his days. Do it?
Whole harem to deal with if he did something too terrible.
Yeah. Don't overestimate the power. So yeah, now you've got the true power. That's right. And so now again, what we're seeing is we're still seeing a king who is weak. He's weak, and in that culture, he's being intimidated by a woman. And again, I'm not saying that I'm saying in that culture, in that time, you have to understand how this would have looked. This is your king. Can't even control his wife. Now they've got to make a law that tells all the women, you will obey your husbands. Is that how you would read it probably? Am I doing the right? Am I being a little bit too much? That's how that would read. All you women will now obey your husbands. Isn't that what this law is, basically? Yeah. A whiny, weak men. And anyway.
Maybe he was worried about the way people look at him.
Yeah, all of it. So, all right, so he's going to do that, and that, of course, is going to set up we got to have a replacement now. We got to have the new queen, and so that's what's going to happen. And they're going to send the dispatches out to all the kingdom, all the provinces, proclaiming that every man should rule over his own. Do you read that? Are you reading this? Do you not see God kind of smiling a little bit and saying, this is who you want to serve? This is the kingdom of men that you want to live under? They have to send an edict out that says, you women obey your husbands. It's a joke. It's sad. But this is what we have here. And I think it's God is mocking Xerxes, if you can't see that here in the text. What a contrast. This man with his vast kingdom and empire is a drunken, failed coward in a lot of ways, who has to use his law, his advisors, to proclaim women obey their husbands. It's incredible.
As you're seeing here, many of the laws and rulings and policies of a lot of cultures are made out of weakness.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely, James. Absolutely. And it's in contrast to God, right? And Jesus Christ and his law. That's right. Good stuff. All right, let's get in. We got to get into chapter 2 here. Let's get into chapter 2. Now, we're not going to be reading verse by verse here and all this, but let's look a little bit here. Incidentally, here in chapter 2, verse 1, later when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, and he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. And so now he's regretting in some ways that she was a good queen. And so the king's personal attendants proposed, we need to find, we need a new queen. And so that's what they're going to begin appointing commissioners in every province to bring the beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let the beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. And so, a couple of things here. What's some things that state about, what are the qualities, what are they looking for in this selection process? Beautiful, young, virgins that also what? Please, or submissive, that please him. And so right out of the gate, we need to understand what this is and what it is not. I've referred to it as the Miss Persian pageant. But that's not real accurate, because a pageant is something you voluntarily enter in, right? This is not that. If you are young and you are a virgin and you're good looking, you're in it. And you're not in it by choice. They're going to come, and notice what the text says. They're going to bring or take. This isn't a mother and father talking to their daughter and say, that's something you ought to enter into. We ought to see if you'd like to be the. No, they're going to come and what?
We heard you had a beautiful.
Yeah, you got a beautiful young virgin daughter. She's coming with us. And so, we have to keep that in mind too when we talk about Esther. Of course, there's compromises with these characters. Even Mordecai himself. We'll talk about that in just a minute with the identity, keeping it secret. These are all flawed characters. And we talked about Esther's probably historically somewhere in that 14 to 17 years, 14 to 21. These are young, virgin, young ladies. And so she doesn't have a choice. They're going to be forced into this harem that is a part of this culture. This would be a part of the royal palace, where young, it'd be in a couple of different waves or levels, where first of all, the virgin girls would first be brought and groomed, and we see that process here, not just to become queen, but in the harem itself. And this would be they would live in separate dwellings. This kind of first level of women would be legally the wives, other than the queen herself. They would then have other women that would be the concubines. These would be young women, again, coming from the slave markets, coming from other nations. Of course, this is going to be a part of a find the next queen out of this. But this harem would be where these women would live, and when they would serve the king's pleasures sexually, they would then live there at the palace in this harem. And if he wanted them, if he needed them, if he called for them, that's what they did. Literally, that was their life. They lived subject to these men. They did not travel. They did not go back and and vacation and see their families. This was their life in the royal. And they, by the way, they kept them isolated. They kept them separated, away from the influence outside world. And when the king wants a woman, what? He gets what he wants. And they are groomed, they are beautified, they are fixed up, they are dolled up, ready to go, so that when the king or his men want one of them, he ain't waiting around, is he? No. That's the culture that this was for these women. And
A bit like that movie. You know that movie, Come to America, that woman, she was taught everything what he liked.
yeah, Jeff, that's a good example, yeah. Groomed to be the queen, groomed to do whatever he wants. Yeah, that's right. I forgot that movie. That's a good one, Jeff. He's got her doing stuff to see if she really obey. Yeah, in a kind of obviously a silly way, yes. Absolutely. But there's nothing funny about this, is there? For young women. And do you see why this was such a... I mean, when nations would be overtaken, when lands would be subjugated to other rulers, you know the first concerns fathers and mothers had was what? Among others, for their son, but for their daughters. What were these conquering men going to do? They're going to take these women. We've seen that in our country. I'm not going to whitewash it for you. We know what happened. We know what happens in those instances, that when they take villages, take towns, military people, individuals, officers, they would often take young virgin girls. We've seen that. We've seen that in our own history, examples of that. Brutality and abuse and power. And we certainly see that throughout human history. And that's exactly what these women did. Now, by the way, the text tells us, what's Mordecai going to be doing back and forth when Esther's there at the palace? Yeah, what's he walking back and forth for? Or news. He's concerned about what? Her. What's going to happen to her? What are they going to do to her? And so this tells us that she has no choice. Now, I understand Daniel made a choice. Shadrach, Meshach made a choice. I understand Esther had a choice. There was a choice there. But in reality, there was no choice. You do this or you be executed. And so, because she will have her call, she will rise up and get the favor, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And she will have her night with the king. And they didn't play cards that night. I can promise you that. And then she, of course, will be chosen and will become his wife, become the queen. But this harem was ugly, and it was an oppression of women. And I'll tell you, until Jesus Christ stepped foot on this earth, nobody exalted women like our Lord and Savior Jesus did. You understand that? Women want to talk, some who don't know what they're talking, women don't know the Scripture, don't know the story of the Bible, that Christianity is oppressive to women. Jesus liberated women. That's what the gospel's all about. Because up until that point in time, and even after that time, we understand there were nations and people that still would oppress women and make them objects of sexual, for their pleasure. And it was Jesus and it was the gospel who broke that and attacked that. And you see that even in the narrative story. And so there's no reason. In the book of Acts, it says that prominent Greek women, Luke tells us that 3 times, I believe, prominent Greek women were attracted to the gospel. Well, I wonder why. Because of what is taught about women from the gospel. That there is neither male or what? Female. That the equality and the love that you see in the gospel for men and women was something, of course, that was attractive to women who said, I think I'd like to know more about that. I think I'd like to know more about this Savior that exalted women and lifted them up. Anyway, go ahead. Does someone have a hand, comment, question? Go ahead, Kathy.
I
Yeah, that's good.
Because
Absolutely.
she's in kind of the same position he was. She was taken without account of her will.
Right.
Joseph was, and God raised them both up to prominent positions
Yeah.
where they could help the people.
Yeah, the parallel is exactly a parallel that I was going to make, that we're going to have to see, that Joseph is a great example of that. Did I see Jeff? Someone else have a...
If that's true, how come some of these cultures still treat women?
How some of these cultures, well, that are not, you talk about, that are...
God, you know, he came to where, you know, women want to learn more.
Yeah.
How come some of these cultures still treat women?
Well, they're certainly not following the gospel. They're not listening to the good news that, you know, one of the first things, by the way, too, I'll just tell you, one of the first things the gospel does, and it did, was, and this may seem like was education. Because women were not viewed as being people that you would educate. And you see that in Christianity. Jesus himself Mary is at the feet of Jesus. She's taking the position of a disciple. And you see that in Priscilla and Aquila, husband and wife, and other women that were workers in the gospel. Yes?
I picture women then being treated like ISIS, the terrorist group, treats other women now. Absolutely.
Yeah. What map did we show? Hello? Middle East? There's a part of that that's still very much a part of that culture, even to this very day. And you think about young girls in that culture, and yeah, it's bad.
The Chosen has done a very good job of bringing that out,
Absolutely, it has.
that that Jesus wanted the women to be able to learn.
Yes, absolutely. Good stuff. Okay, so let's quickly here. Let me see. I think we've seen the example of Boaz, by the way, as an example for a godly man, and then Jesus. You also see, again, other examples, 1 Peter 3, 4, and 5, the gentle, quiet spirit, which is, pleasing to the Lord. And we're going to see that in Esther. She's going to be, with her spirit, with her submission, she's going to win favor. And God's going to honor her and work through her. Mordecai, real quick, what we learned about him was that he worked in the citadel, so probably he has a government job. He's probably some higher ranking, not at the top, but in the citadel capital, he is likely in works for the government, has risen to a position of we noted this, he's from the tribe of what? Benjamin. We talked about that, the significance of that. Remember Haman? Yeah, an Agagite that one Saul, remember, that was from the first king of Israel, was told to destroy them, and he didn't do it. Now one, a descendant from the tribe of Benjamin, will be faithful and will enact. And so we see that as well. There is some, and I don't want to get into this too much, but again, we've talked a little bit about the father, his father, but likely this is his father or grandfather was taken into captivity. The math just doesn't seem to work. This would put Mordecai at least 110, 120. If you do the math, it's probably not what the math is. And so this is probably his father that was taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. And so now here in the 470 BC, this is the effects of that is this great-grandson Mordecai, whose family was taken into captivity. His brother, apparently his younger brother, because Esther is his niece, he's the uncle, is he's going to be looking after her, and so we see that here with Mordecai. And okay, well, I want you to notice here that of course the text tells us that she is she's beautiful. So Esther is beautiful. She is had a lovely figure, so she's built well. She is beautiful on the outside, but again, that's why I said from the 1 Peter 3 and 1 Timothy 2, what is most going to be impressive about Esther is the inner what? Inner character. Because she's going to win over who?
She was over the head you.
Everybody. Everybody.
Kind of like Joseph's.
Yeah, back to the Joseph comparison. What does Joseph do? He wins people over. How? By ranting and raving? This is unfair. I'm telling you what, we ought to rise up in rebellion against this, and we ought to, let's get a... No, what does he do? He submits. That's what he has to do. I mean, he has an option, and there's even a limit for Joseph. Vashti will follow that example, if you will, of Joseph had a limit of saying, nope, I'm not going to go this far with his Potiphar's wife, remember? But nonetheless, he is submissive. He finds favor. Joseph does. What does Esther find? Grace. Favor. It'll say twice that she found favor. She finds grace. And so I want you to think about that. We'll come back to this and talk about what that looked like, what that might have looked like, why she might have been different, and then that sets up her what she's going to do when she gets ready to go with her night with the king. And so we'll get into that and finish up chapter 2 next week. All right. Appreciate you guys being here. All right.